I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought my love for him, even after he was gone, was enough. Every month I sent his mother $200, but I had no idea what I was really paying for. My husband died years ago. I still remember the sharp, surreal shock of that day, the way the world seemed to tilt and wobble beneath my feet, leaving me clutching at nothing. He had been my anchor, my safe harbor, the person whose laughter could fill even the darkest days with light. And suddenly, he was gone. No warning. No chance to say goodbye, just silence that spread through every corner of my life. In the beginning, everything felt impossible. I remember standing in our empty living room, touching the objects he had left behind, hearing the faint echo of his presence in a place that now felt hollow. Simple tasks, making breakfast, paying bills, even answering the phone, felt like climbing mountains. Every corner of the house whispered reminders that he wasn't coming back. Amid that chaos, I clung to one ritual that gave me a fragile sense of control: sending his mother $200 every month. It wasn't a lot, not really, but for some reason, it mattered. It wasn't about money, it was about connection, about honoring him, about maintaining a fragile bridge to the family I had married into, even though he was no longer there. It was my way of keeping a thread of him alive in the world, a thread that I could hold on to when everything else had unraveled. The first few months were quiet, almost comforting. I would sit at the kitchen table, carefully writing the check, folding it neatly into the envelope, and sealing it with care. I would imagine her opening it, seeing my handwriting, thinking of him, perhaps even thinking of me. That imagined smile, that fleeting connection, was a balm on the raw edges of grief. Each time I dropped the envelope into the mailbox, I felt a little lighter, as if my small act of devotion could somehow stitch the tear left in my heart. I told myself it wasn't about the money at all. It was about love, about memory, about respect. I thought that by continuing to send it, I was keeping part of him alive in the world. And for a while it worked. I felt a sense of purpose, a sense of doing something right, a sense that even in the absence of his touch and his voice, I could still honor him. But life has a way of complicating even the simplest acts. And soon, subtle shifts began. It started with her tone on the phone. "Did you send it this month?" she would ask, carefully casual, almost innocent, but there was something there I couldn't ignore, a sharpness, a pressure, a quiet demand that I couldn't place at first. I assured her I had sent it, of course, but after each call, I felt a knot in my chest that wouldn't unravel. I told myself I was imagining it. "Grief makes you hypersensitive," I said. "It makes shadows where there are none." Yet, somewhere deep inside, a tiny voice whispered that what I was experiencing wasn't imaginary. Something about the relationship I had imagined simple, respectful, mutual was beginning to twist into something else. Something heavy. Then came the requests. At first, they seemed minor, reasonable. "Could you send a little extra this month? Just a bit. Things are tight here." I hesitated, always, but then I would relent. A little extra wouldn't hurt. After all, it was for him, for the memory, for peace. And so I gave. Time and again, month after month, out of love and loyalty, I gave. But what began as small gestures soon became a pattern. Every month brought some new reason: unexpected bills, urgent repairs, sudden emergencies. And every month, I complied. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was respect. I told myself it was the right thing to do. But in the quiet moments, when the house was empty and the world still, I felt a rising unease, a quiet sense of being trapped in a loop I could not escape. It wasn't until I visited her that I saw the truth. I don't know why I hadn't seen it before. I thought I was checking in, making sure she was okay, doing my duty as a wife and as a daughter-in-law in spirit. What I found instead left me breathless. The house was larger than I remembered. Modern appliances gleaming in the kitchen, furniture new and polished, cars parked in the driveway that I knew she could not have afforded on her own. Every dollar I had sent over the years, every check, every envelope carefully dropped into the mailbox, every quiet sacrifice had fueled a life of comfort that had nothing to do with need. I felt shock, disbelief, anger, sorrow, and betrayal, all at once. I had given freely, out of grief, out of love, out of hope that my devotion could honor him. And she had exploited it. The person I had trusted, the person I thought shared a bond of respect and family, had been taking advantage of me for years. I confronted her. My voice trembled at first, but I steadied it, drawing on a reserve of courage I didn't know I had. "Julia," I said, "I see now. You don't need the money. I can see that." She looked at me, startled, defensive, searching for words. She stammered, insisted she had expenses, that she had been honest, that life was difficult. But I saw through it. I didn't need proof. Her eyes, her hesitation, her shifting gaze said it all. I went home and cried, not just for the betrayal, but for myself. For all the years of my life I had poured into this act of devotion, for the countless sacrifices made in good faith, for the grief that had been twisted into manipulation. And yet, in the midst of tears, I felt clarity. Honoring him did not mean surrendering my life. Honoring him did not mean surrendering my dignity. Honoring him meant living fully, refusing to be controlled by guilt, obligation, or deceit. The next month, I stopped sending the money. I did not make a grand announcement or write a long letter. I simply stopped. At first, I worried about what she might say, about what the fallout would be, about what others might think. But it didn't matter. A sense of relief, almost overwhelming in its intensity, washed over me. Peace returned, gentle and steady, like a tide reclaiming a shore I had forgotten existed. For the first time in years, I felt control of my life returning. I could breathe. I could live. I could grieve without being manipulated. I began to rebuild parts of my life I had neglected. I traveled. I reconnected with old friends. I rediscovered hobbies and passions I had abandoned. And through it all, I remembered him not in the shadow of control, but in the light of memory, warmth, and love that no one could take from me. I realized then that grief is complicated, that love can be misused, even by those closest to us. But we get to choose how we carry that grief, how we honor those we have lost, and how we protect ourselves. I chose peace. I chose strength. I chose to honor him by living honestly, by loving without losing myself, by remembering without being manipulated. Every month, I had sat with that envelope in my hand, feeling the weight of obligation, loss, and love. Now, I sit with memories in my heart, untainted by deceit, free from the chains of obligation. I finally understand that honoring someone's memory is not about giving endlessly, it's about living fully, carrying the good we've shared, and protecting the good still left in ourselves. After I stopped sending the money, the world didn't immediately change. Life outside my small apartment didn't suddenly become brighter, and the betrayal I had felt didn't vanish with a single decision. But there was something subtle, almost imperceptible, shifting inside me, a sense of self returning, like a river slowly clearing after being clogged with debris for years. I could breathe differently now, think differently, and most importantly, feel differently. I began to notice things I hadn't in years. The warmth of sunlight on my face during morning walks, the taste of fresh coffee unaccompanied by the weight of duty, the way laughter came easier now, unburdened by fear of judgment or expectation. Even small choices, like which book to read or which path to take home, felt like a reclaiming of autonomy I hadn't realized I'd lost. It was astonishing how the simple act of saying no to someone else's demands could ripple through an entire life, restoring pieces I thought were gone forever. But peace is rarely absolute. One evening, about 2 weeks after my quiet withdrawal, the phone rang. I froze when I saw her name on the screen, Julia. My heart thumped in that old, familiar rhythm of fear, anger, and uncertainty. I debated ignoring it, letting it ring endlessly into the quiet of my apartment, but my thumb pressed a green button before reason could stop me. "Sarah," she said, her voice carefully measured, almost too polite. I wanted to talk. I gritted my teeth, keeping my tone calm, almost unnaturally calm. "Talk about what?" There was a pause, and in that pause, I could hear the hesitation, the almost imperceptible tremor of someone caught in a situation they hadn't expected. "About the money. I just wanted to." She stopped, swallowed, and continued. "I just wanted to explain myself." I listened, waiting, my chest tight, my mind replaying every moment of doubt and betrayal. She spoke about bills I hadn't known of, expenses I hadn't imagined, obligations that had supposedly justified her lifestyle. Her words felt like thin veils over a truth I had already seen, but I allowed her to speak. I wanted to hear it all, not because I needed her approval, but because I needed to close the chapter fully in my own mind. When she finally stopped, I said softly, firmly, "Julia, I've seen enough. I understand life can be difficult, but that doesn't excuse years of deception. I cannot give any more, not out of anger, not out of spite, but because I must give to myself now. I must protect what remains of my life, my peace, my memory of him." There was a long silence. I could imagine her holding the phone, her mind racing for the words that wouldn't come. I didn't know you felt that way," she finally muttered, almost like a confession. "And now you do," I replied. "I've learned something important. Love and grief are not meant to be manipulated. Respect is not a currency to be spent." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly, but my heart steadier than it had been in years. That night, I slept without dreams filled with anxiety or guilt. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my life. The following weeks became a journey of quiet rediscovery. I visited places I had avoided since his death, hesitant to venture alone, fearing reminders of what I had lost. I walked through the botanical gardens, inhaled the scent of rain on city streets, and even laughed at a small street performer whose antics were so absurd they broke through the dullness that had settled in my chest for years. But the past is persistent. I could not escape the memories, nor would I want to. One evening, I pulled out a photo album, pages filled with moments frozen in time, his smile at the park, the silly faces we made during vacations, the quiet moments at home when words weren't necessary. I ran my fingers over the edges of the photographs, feeling the warmth of his presence and the spaces between images. It was bittersweet, painful, and yet comforting. The past was mine to hold, and no one could take it from me. As I turned the pages, my phone buzzed with a notification from social media. Curiosity pulled me in, though I had promised myself I wouldn't dwell on her posts anymore. Pictures of lavish dinners, tropical vacations, and new cars flickered across the screen. The urge to feel anger surged briefly, but I quelled it. My life was no longer tethered to her image of what I should provide or feel guilty about. I closed the app, feeling the liberation of choice in my chest. It was in that quiet, resolute space that I began to think of the future, not in terms of duty or obligation, but in terms of possibilities, of adventures and experiences that were mine to claim. I started to write again, pouring thoughts into a journal I had abandoned long ago. Words flowed, stories taking shape, and I realized that grief could transform into something creative, something life-affirming. And yet, the world was not entirely quiet. A letter arrived in the mail, handwritten, familiar. My hands trembled as I opened it, expecting threats, pleas, maybe even apologies I wasn't sure I wanted. Inside was a note from her, short, almost perfunctory. "I understand your decision. I will not contact you about the money again. I hope you find peace." I held the letter for a long time, breathing in the finality it offered. No anger, no victory, no bitter words exchanged, just acknowledgement. That was all I needed. My tears came quietly, not from betrayal or loss this time, but from the release, the closing of a door that had remained open far too long. The next months were not easy, but they were honest. I traveled to places I had dreamed of visiting with him, walked along beaches that whispered secrets to the waves, and climbed mountains that tested my strength and resolve. I met new people, some who reminded me of his kindness, some who challenged me to see the world differently, and all of them helped me shape a life that belonged to me, not to memory or manipulation. It was during one of these trips, standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, that I realized the depth of what I had learned. Grief is not something to escape, nor is love something to surrender blindly. The memory of him was not a chain to bind me, but a guide to show me how to live fully, with intention, with courage, and with heart. I breathed in the salty air, feeling the wind lift the weight I had carried for so long, and understood with clarity that peace is a choice and I had chosen it. The days that followed my confrontation with Julia were quieter than anything I had known in years. I woke without the sharp pull of obligation, without the constant, gnawing anxiety that had been my companion for so long. The emptiness that had once been unbearable now felt like space, a space I could fill with myself, with my choices, with life that was entirely my own. I began small. The first morning after the letter arrived, I brewed coffee and didn't hurry. I let the sunlight linger on my skin, let the quiet hum of the city seep through the window, and just breathed. It felt luxurious, even indulgent. I hadn't realized how much of my life had been structured around him and his family, around rituals of duty and respect that no longer served me. And now, there was nothing but time and the gentle promise of freedom. Freedom, however, comes with its own challenges. For years, I had defined myself by my connection to him, by my care for others, by the constant, unspoken weight of responsibility. Without that, I felt raw, exposed, unsure of who I was outside of the grief that had defined me. The first few days, I wandered the apartment aimlessly, my hands brushing over old photographs, my mind spinning with memories I wasn't sure how to process. One afternoon, I found myself drawn to a dusty corner of the living room where his guitar had been left untouched. I hadn't played in years, not since the day he died, when even the sound of music had felt unbearable. Now, I picked it up, hesitated, and strummed a single note. The vibration hummed through me, sending shivers down my spine. And then I played another, and another, until chords filled the empty space around me. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And in that imperfect music, I found something I had thought lost forever, a spark of joy. Encouraged, I began to make plans I had long abandoned. I signed up for a painting class at a local community center, something I had always wanted to do but never made time for. The first day, I walked into the bright, sunlit studio, greeted by canvases covered in vibrant colors and the smell of fresh paint. I hesitated at the door, self-conscious and uncertain, but the instructor's warm smile drew me in. "First time?" she asked. I nodded, and in that simple acknowledgement, I felt a flicker of connection, of belonging, that I hadn't known in years. Painting became a daily ritual, a way to translate my emotions onto canvas, to take the rawness of grief and the warmth of memory and shape them into something tangible. Each brushstroke was a small victory, a declaration that I could create, that I could feel, that I could exist outside the shadow of what had been taken from me. My apartment slowly transformed as well. Walls once bare now bore splashes of color. Photographs of him in happier times were framed and arranged carefully, but with space around them, as though I was creating breathing room for both memory and life. I also began to reconnect with friends I had neglected. Invitations I had ignored for years were now met with enthusiastic acceptance. I met them at cafes, walked with them in parks, shared stories and laughter, letting myself be vulnerable again in ways I hadn't dared since his passing. The conversations were sometimes awkward, sometimes joyful, sometimes bittersweet, but always honest. And honesty, I realized, was more nourishing than any comfort I had tried to buy with money. It was during one of these outings that I met someone who would change the quiet rhythm of my life in ways I hadn't expected. His name was Daniel, a photographer with a gentle, observant presence who noticed details others often overlooked. We met at a small art exhibit downtown. I was staring at a painting, trying to interpret the swirls of color when he leaned beside me and said softly, "The artist seems angry at the world, but also hopeful. Can you see that?" I turned to him, surprised by his insight. I think I do," I replied. We talked for hours, wandering through the gallery, discussing art, life, and loss. There was a softness in his voice, a patience in his gaze, and I found myself sharing stories I hadn't told anyone in years, the quiet moments with my husband, the grief that followed, the struggle to reconcile love and betrayal. And Daniel listened, not with judgment, not with pity, but with understanding. Our friendship grew slowly, deliberately, without pressure or expectation. With him, I rediscovered the simple joy of connection, of laughter and conversation that wasn't tied to obligation or guilt. He didn't replace what I had lost, nor did I expect him to. He existed alongside my grief, acknowledging it, accepting it, and gently inviting me to live in the present. Even as I embraced these new experiences, remnants of the past lingered. I would occasionally dream of him, my husband, in vivid flashes, his laugh echoing in the empty apartment, his hand brushing mine unexpectedly, his eyes warm with love. Sometimes these dreams brought tears, sometimes a smile. I learned to let them come without clinging, to accept them as reminders of the life I had cherished and the person I still carried within me. At home, the evenings became a time for reflection. I wrote in my journal, capturing my thoughts, my fears, and my newfound joys. Writing had always been a refuge, but now it was also a tool of empowerment, a way to articulate a life I was actively shaping rather than passively enduring. I wrote letters I would never send, confessions of anger and sorrow, gratitude and hope, acknowledging both the betrayal and the love that had fueled my journey. One day, while sorting through old boxes, I found a stack of letters my husband had written before he died, small notes, sometimes just a few words, expressing love, gratitude, and dreams for our future. I hadn't read them in years, too painful at first, but now, in this space of reclaimed strength, I opened them. His words were timeless, a reminder that love persists, even in absence, even through loss. I wept, but not with the anguish that had once consumed me. These were tears of remembrance, of connection, of continuity. In the months that followed, my life became a tapestry woven from old memories and new experiences. I traveled to small towns I had always wanted to see, capturing their beauty through the lens of my own perception. I cooked meals I hadn't attempted in years, experimenting with flavors, scents, and textures. I danced, sometimes alone in the living room, sometimes with new friends at local gatherings, allowing myself to feel joy without guilt. The most profound lesson, however, was the realization that honoring someone's memory is not a passive act of giving, nor is it a surrender to expectation or manipulation. It is an active, conscious choice to carry the love forward in ways that sustain life rather than diminish it. Every day I chose to live, to laugh, to create, to connect. I honored him, not with money, not with obligation, but with presence, with intention, with courage. And so, the quiet apartment, once a mausoleum of grief and duty, transformed into a sanctuary of growth and hope. The walls echoed with music, the windows with laughter, and the air with possibility. I had stepped out of the shadows of loss, out of the web of manipulation, and into a life that was authentically mine. Yet, even as I rebuilt myself, I knew the journey was not complete. Grief has many layers, and trust once broken is slow to mend. I would continue to navigate relationships, new and old, with caution and wisdom, guided by the lessons of the past. I would continue to explore the world, to paint, to write, to love in measured, intentional ways. And in that journey, I would honor him, not as a ghost in the shadows, but as a light guiding me forward. Healing is never a straight line. I learned that slowly, sometimes painfully, as the months passed. Just when I believed I had reached solid ground, the past found ways to resurface, not as a storm this time, but as quiet reminders, subtle tests of the strength I had worked so hard to build. It began with a message. Simple, unexpected. Julia's name appeared on my phone one evening as I was cooking dinner, the scent of garlic and olive oil filling the apartment. My body reacted before my mind could. My shoulders tensed, my heart quickened, and a familiar heaviness settled in my chest. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to open it at all. The message was short. I didn't mean to hurt you. I hope you know that. That was it. No apology, no accountability, just a statement that hovered somewhere between regret and self-protection. I sat down at the table, phone in hand, feeling the old pull, the instinct to explain, to comfort, to make things easier for someone else, even at my own expense. That instinct had ruled my life for years. But this time, I didn't respond. Instead, I placed the phone face down and focused on my breathing. I reminded myself of everything I had learned, that understanding someone's pain does not require sacrificing your own boundaries, that forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation, and that silence can sometimes be the strongest answer. Still, the message unsettled me. That night, sleep came in fragments. Memories returned uninvited: the early days after my husband's death, Julia's quiet presence at the funeral, the way she had taken my hand and said, "We'll take care of each other now." At the time, those words had felt like comfort. Now, they felt like the beginning of a long misunderstanding. The next morning, I met Daniel for coffee. He noticed immediately that something was off. "You're quieter today," he said gently. "Do you want to talk about it?" I hesitated. Trust was still new to me, fragile like glass. But something in his calm presence reassured me. So I told him about the message, about the years of giving, about how difficult it still was to untangle love from obligation. He listened carefully, then said something that stayed with me. "Sometimes people don't hurt us on purpose, but that doesn't mean they didn't hurt us. And it doesn't mean we owe them continued access to our lives." His words settled into me like truth. I realized then that part of my healing wasn't just about moving forward, it was about learning to stand still without being pulled backward. As weeks passed, I noticed other ways the past tried to reclaim space in my life. Old acquaintances reached out, some with genuine concern, others with curiosity masked as sympathy. "You're doing so well now," they'd say. "You must be over it. Over it." As if grief were something you could cross off a list once enough time had passed. But grief doesn't disappear. It evolves. There were days when a song on the radio would catch me off guard, when the sight of a couple holding hands would stir a familiar ache. There were moments of guilt for laughing, for feeling joy, for allowing someone new into my life. I had to remind myself again and again that love is not a finite resource. Loving again did not mean loving him less. One evening, while organizing my bookshelves, I found an old notebook tucked behind a row of novels. It was one I had kept during the first year after his death. I opened it cautiously, as though it might bite. The pages were filled with raw, fragmented thoughts: anger, despair, longing. But there were also entries about hope, about survival, about promises I had made to myself. One line stopped me cold. "I don't know who I am without him, but I hope I will be someone strong." I closed the notebook and pressed it to my chest, tears welling up. I had become that person. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but undeniably stronger. And then came the real test. Julia called. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me, curiosity, perhaps, or closure, pushed me to pick up. Her voice sounded older, thinner, stripped of the confidence I remembered. "I'm not calling about money," she said quickly. I wanted to tell you I've been thinking about everything." I let her speak. She talked about loneliness, about mistakes, about fear. She admitted, in careful fragments, that she had leaned on me too heavily, that she hadn't realized how much she had taken until it was gone. Whether that was true or simply regret at losing support, I couldn't say. When she finished, she waited. I could feel her expectation through the silence. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied calmly. "But I need you to understand something. I can care about what you're feeling without re-entering a relationship that hurt me. I've moved on, and I need you to respect that." There was a pause. Then a quiet, resigned "I understand." When the call ended, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only relief. A chapter had truly closed. That night, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. I thought about how far I had come, not just from grief, but from the version of myself who believed love meant endless giving, no matter the cost. I understood now that love also means discernment. It means choosing where your energy goes. It means protecting what is sacred within you. The past had knocked on my door, and I had answered not with fear, not with guilt, but with clarity. And for the first time, I knew without doubt that I was ready for whatever came next. There comes a moment in every long journey when you stop looking back, not because the past no longer matters, but because it has finally settled into its proper place. For me, that moment arrived quietly, without ceremony, On an ordinary morning, I was standing by the window, watching the city wake up, when I realized I was no longer measuring my life against what I had lost. I was simply living it. Grief had once been the loudest voice in my life. It dictated my choices, shaped my days, and whispered guilt into every moment of happiness. But now, grief had softened. It hadn't disappeared, and I didn't want it to. It had transformed into something gentler, something that walked beside me instead of weighing me down. I thought about my husband often, not with the sharp ache that once stole my breath, but with warmth. I remembered his laughter, his kindness, the way he believed in doing the right thing even when it was difficult. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that if he were here, he wouldn't want my life defined by sacrifice and pain. He would want me to be whole. I finally understood something that had taken years to learn. Love is not proven by how much you give away, especially when giving costs you your peace. Love is proven by how you live, how you grow, and how you protect what is good within you. The money I had sent his mother was never really about her. It was about me trying to hold on to something that felt safe in a world that had fallen apart. It was about control in a moment when I had none. Letting go of that ritual felt terrifying at first, but it turned out to be the very thing that saved me. In the months that followed, my life grew fuller in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I continued painting, continued writing, continued traveling. I learned to enjoy my own company without feeling lonely. I learned to sit with silence without fear. I learned that happiness does not betray the dead, it honors the love that once existed. Daniel remained a gentle presence in my life. We took things slowly, with honesty and respect, never rushing, never pretending the past didn't exist. He never tried to compete with a memory, and I never asked him to. What we shared was grounded in the present, built on choice rather than obligation. And that made all the difference. One evening, as we walked along a quiet street, he asked me something simple. Do you ever regret the years you spent giving so much to others? I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I said, because they taught me who I am. But I regret not knowing sooner that I was allowed to stop. That truth became my anchor. I stopped apologizing for setting boundaries. I stopped explaining myself to people who didn't want to understand. I stopped carrying responsibility that wasn't mine. And in doing so, I gained something priceless: peace. Looking back now, I see my journey clearly. I see a woman broken by loss, clinging to love in the only way she knew how. I see how grief made her vulnerable, how trust was misplaced, how kindness was exploited. But I also see resilience. I see growth. I see strength born from pain. Most importantly, I see choice. I chose to stop being manipulated by guilt. I chose to stop confusing sacrifice with love. I chose to honor my husband not by giving endlessly, but by living fully. Every memory I keep of him now is clean, untouched by resentment, obligation, or regret. He lives in my heart, not in my bank statements. And that is where he belongs. If you are listening to this story and see yourself in it, if you have ever given too much, stayed too long, or confused love with suffering, know this. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to let go. You are allowed to heal. This story isn't just about money. It's about boundaries. It's about grief. It's about reclaiming your life. And if this story moved you, helped you, or made you feel less alone, please subscribe for more real stories about healing, truth, and finding strength after loss. Because sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is choose ourselves and keep going.